Welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Shay, and today I'm going to talk about 23andMe syndrome, also called Ancestry.com syndrome, where I'm going to teach you how to end the confusion, the overwhelm, and frustration of your genetics tests. And the reason why this is important is because there's a promise that comes with doing your 23andMe or Ancestry.com. The promise is that you'll have the information that you need, that you'll know what you need to do for your health, and that you'll be given a list of relevant lifestyle, nutrition, and exercise recommendations, and that it will make sense to the lay public, and it's going to be easy to implement. And that is just fundamentally not true. When people get back their results, what they feel is overwhelmed. They don't see. They get this deluge of health tips that are just barraged at them. There's no prioritization. There's no help with implementing. It's like, oh, I have the curly hair gene and I have the dreaded methylation thing. The recommendations can come off sounding generic or unspecified to a unique situation, and it can be overwhelming and confused, and frankly, it can be a bit scary as well, because you don't know where to start, what to do, what's important, and if it's actually going to work or not. So what do we do about it? First off, there's a disclaimer. It's there. Work with a practitioner, someone who's been certified in understanding genetics, interpreting genetics in results, particularly for fit genes, which is what I am. And what I would recommend is getting your 23andMe and or Ancestry.com results transferred over to Fit Genes. Now, Fit Genes is a very, very unique company. It's based out of Australia, but if you have a 23andMe or Ancestry.com, there's a very easy, secure way to transfer the data over. And what will happen is that they will take all the data and organize it into the most important genetic clusters, the main drivers of all diseases. So they take all the data and they pick out the 64 genes that are the most important as it relates to the drivers of diseases: inflammation, free radical damage, liver detoxification, vitamin D receptors, methylation, cardiovascular, circulation, and fat and energy metabolism. And then once you have those clusters, then they're organized and prioritized. That way you can see if there is a cluster of genes that have bad variants on them, then you can know to focus there. So here's an example comparing one person's cardiovascular groupings to another. So the person on the left has a near perfect cardiovascular roll of the genetic dice, where the person on the right has basically the opposite. That the person on the right really has some trouble projected for them in their cardiovascular circulation future, the health of their blood pressure, the health of their heart, the health of their vascular system. So because we see there's a cluster together, then we can look at the lifestyle recommendations that address all or most of those negative variants. So instead of you getting a list of 300 health tips, you get, here's the top 10. Then after those top 10, then here's the next 10. And what these are prioritized lifted lifestyle recommendations based on your unique combination of your genes. So here's an example. If this is someone who had a grouping where they had an inflammatory-based weight gain based on exercise. So the more they exercise, the more weight that they put on. Now, this may be counterintuitive to some of you hearing it, but it has to do with her inflammatory pathway. So when I analyzed her genes, she contacted me saying, I don't know what's happening. I'm getting fatter. My muscle tone's washing out. And some other issues going on with me. There's something really weird. The only thing that's different is that I started this really intense new trainer who's just like having me do these really hard exercises nearly every day. So I went back and I saw, I didn't know she'd gone and done this, because if she had told me ahead of time I was going to work with this type of trainer, I would have said no. But she just went in and did it and didn't tell me. Then she called me after the fact. So I looked at her genes and I was like, okay, well, you've got over-initiation of your genes, inflammatory genes. You over-sustain them, and you've got all three of the CRP genes. Those genes are the ones involved with the liver, particularly acute phase inflammatory reactions. And she underclears, meaning that her interleukin-10s that you've got genes that initiate inflammation, and you got a class of genes called the interleukin-10s that put it out. Now, if people have green dots, those are fire hoses, but if they have yellow and red dots, those are, squirt guns. So what happened is that when she was really doing this intense exercise, too much of it, her little Bic lighter of inflammation blew up into a massive inferno. It particularly affected, it was particularly pointed on the acute phase inflammation in the liver, and she had real trouble extinguishing it. So what was happening is that she was gaining water weight, because the way inflammatory weight works is that when you inflame, your body will retain water to dilute the toxic inflammatory chemicals to buy you time for your liver to clear them out. So her liver was struggling along with the inflammation, so she just started layering on water, just kind of swelling, and that explained the washed out muscular tone. So if she wanted to lose weight, doing overtraining was the worst thing she could have done. I put her on an anti-inflammatory nutrition and supplemental regime, as well as telling her how to cut back on the intensity of the exercise and do different types of exercise so she could still get the benefits of exercise without triggering this massive inflammation. Now, just to be clear, we're talking about inflammation. Like, what's the purpose of inflammation? Inflammation is the body's natural response to deal with an infection and to deal with an injury. Very, very important as hunter-gatherers, because we were at high risk of infections, whether it was poor sanitation because people didn't know as well as they should have not to pee and poo in their own water supply, or there was an animal that died upstream, or they got cut, whether it was from an animal attack or from sharp brambles or whatever, and they got sepsis. Like, having a strong inflammatory response was very useful in hunter-gatherer times, but less so today, when we're not really at risk of being bitten by a bear or a wolf, and we've done so much for sanitation that infections have just drastically reduced. So the holdover hyperinflammatory response now backfires. And what it leads to is chronic inflammation. I mean, the first stage is you overinflame. And what happens is that if you have too much inflammation, it overlays and becomes destructive, leading to tissue damage, muscle wastage, bone loss over long periods of time, or just chronic pain. You've got, if you have this, inflammation can become chronic inflammation, which is really, really destructive. So we really need to mitigate that. But on the surface level, a lot of people, they're trying to lose weight, or like they're concerned about their New Year's resolutions, or they want to, look well for the summer, or they've just finished the holidays, whether it's like Thanksgiving, or it's New Year's, or it's Christmas, or whatever holiday people are celebrating. Then they get into like the January, February like recovery period where they're wanting to lose all the weight. Well, a lot of people make the mistake of just signing up for a gym and working as hard as they can. And like with this client's experience, it did the reverse of what she wanted. She actually put on weight because she was dealing with weight in a way that wasn't her weight loss type, because she was an inflammatory type. So for her, whatever she was doing to over-exercise was triggering inflammation, was putting on fat. Not only water weight, but actually inflammation itself will trigger fat retention. It will trigger fat creation. For the geeks out there, it has to do with the interleukin-6 pathway, but that's another story. But basically, if you know your genes, and more importantly, if they're organized according to the Fit Genes system, you can assess things like weight gain. Fit Genes is not just for dealing with weight, not at all. It's an incredibly powerful system of assessing your genes in a prioritized and logical and systematic way for your long-term health, including sustained, reliable, and relatively easy weight loss if you have excessive weight. Because in the Fit Genes universe, I can identify are someone inflammatory or water retention type? Are they a hormonal toxic type? Or are they a caloric fat gaining type? So basically, do people gain weight because they overinflame, their liver is overwhelmed and they can't deal with toxins and hormones around the time of the month? Or is it someone who packs on calories more readily than others? So if someone's got issues with inflammation, we look at their anti-inflammatory genes, we look at their pro-inflammatory genes, and we design an entire lifestyle plan based on research, on peer-reviewed trials done on humans, to identify what's the most meaningful number of changes that can be done, the fewest number of most meaningful changes that can be done to the most important genes. So if someone's an inflammatory type, I put them on an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, diet, nutrition, supplements, exercise. If they are a hormone toxic type, then I put them on a detox diet, detox nutrients, special other types of lifestyle interventions to help with their hormones and their liver. And if they're a caloric weight gainer, then we deal with another type of diet, other types of exercise, and so on. So from your genes, you can assess all of this. And one thing that's to be clear on is that your genes are able to not be changed themselves. Like, your genes won't change, but how they express will change. Genes are a dimmer switch. They can be dialed up and dialed down. People have different ranges on their dial based on their genes. Like, someone could have this to this as their range, or they could be this, or it could be this. But you still have some wiggle room with these specific types of genes, and you can change so much by understanding your genes. Like, this is a report coming out of Australia that in terms of obesity, 70% of obesity is controlled by genetics. And if you know your genetics, like we talked about, your inflammatory type, a toxic hormonal type, or a caloric type, or some combination, then you know your genetic playing field. People have different parameters, and if you know your genes, then what you can do is play within those boundaries in the proper way. The person I talked about before, she went way outside the boundary because she was an inflammatory type, and it just went way too far outside. So once you have your genes and you have your goals, then we can create a clear plan. So what I encourage you to do is to get your 23andMe or your Ancestry.com converted into the Fit Genes model. Now, you can do this with a Fit Genes practitioner, which I'm one, and there's other things that Fit Genes offers as well. For example, it offers the carb choice panel, which is unique to Fit Genes, and this you can genetically determine your optimal diet. Like, do you have the carb tolerance of someone who's a keto, a paleo, a Mediterranean, or a high carb person? So what they do is they test your AME1 genes, the copy numbers, not the variants, but how many duplicates. And if you've got 1 unit of this gene, then you spit out so much enzyme to break down carbs. If you got 2, you have double. If you have 3, you have triple. If you have 4, you have quadruple. So the fewer number copies of this gene, the more carb sensitive you are. Like, I'm a 2. I can't digest carbs well at all. I thought I was gluten intolerant, but really I was carb intolerant. So within 1 week of changing my diet in terms of my genetic capacity to handle carbs, my digestive problems of 20 years went away because I was eating too many carbs. Doesn't matter if there was organic sprouted quinoa, which it was just too many carbs for my genetics. So what happens is that if you've got a specific number, then you know how much you can tolerate. And here's an example of like a visually difference. I'm a 2 on the left, and someone can have 9+, they can handle carbs way better than I can. Additionally, from the carb choice, we've got, the Fit Genes has called the food choice panel. Now, what this is, it tells you your ability to tolerate gluten. Now, I'm fine with gluten according to my genes. I didn't find out about this till later when they had this panel was released recently, and I thought I was gluten intolerant. It turns out I'm actually fine with gluten, but it was my carb tolerance was really low. That's why I was getting all the symptoms of gluten issues, even though I didn't have the genes for gluten intolerance. I also got checked for lactose, and I also got checked for alcohol. Now, the alcohol test for this is really interesting because it could tell you if you're vulnerable to alcoholism genetically, or if you're vulnerable to the alcohol flush, like if you get all red or whatever from taking alcohol. It also can tell you if you're at risk of having caffeine-induced anxiety. Some people can chug back coffee and caffeine or whatever, and they're fine. Other people, like me, get super anxious when I have caffeine, and finally figured out why. The other thing that this food choice panel checks you for is for salt. Are you sensitive to salt? Do you actually are you at risk of developing high blood pressure due to salt? Some people are genetically fine with salt, some people aren't. This can tell you. The food choice panel is absolutely amazing because it checks for the 5 major potential risk foods in our Western diet. Now, gluten, dairy, alcohol, caffeine, salt. Now, obviously, these things are in non-Western diets, but it's like there's certain cultures that don't have alcohol. Only until recently has Asian culture really been introduced to dairy. And when I say recently, like in the past 100 years or so. So it's really important for people who have any diet to actually get these 5 things tested in the food choice panel. So I wanted to shoot this quick video to go over the 23andMe syndrome or Ancestry.com syndrome and let you know that there is hope, that you don't have to deal with the overwhelm and the frustration and the anxiety and the confusion of your 23andMe results being all over the place and not knowing how to prioritize and how to organize your data. Now, there's a solution. It's through FitGenes. Now, I'm a certified FitGenes practitioner, and I can take your data through FitGenes and analyze it and actually give you a custom lifestyle, nutrition, diet, exercise plan that is prioritized and organized specific to you and help you implement it. In addition, FitGenes also has 2 really critical gene tests for your diet to determine what's the best type of general diet for in terms of your macronutrient profile, carbs, proteins, and fats. Are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? That's really important to know. For every meal of your life, that's a huge input into how you're healthy and functional and how much high performance you're going to get out of your life. And that also has the food choice panel. So I hope this was helpful. Please, there'll be a link to contact me in the description below. You can contact me for a free 15-minute consult to see if this approach to change your 23andMe and or your Ancestry.com, and to also get the carb choice and food choice. And if you haven't had a 23andMe or an Ancestry.com, we can run a fresh swab and send it over to the lab in Australia and get the genes relevant to what comes out from the 23andMe when you transfer them over to FitGenes.